The world has experienced some of the most devastating explosions in history, both natural and unnatural. The consequences of these explosions have been felt around the world. In this episode, we will explore the 10 biggest explosions, examine the causes and effects of each of these disasters, and how they have shaped the world we live in today. If you like the episode, click the thumb up. It's one click for you, and it lets us know we're moving in the right direction. To make sure you don't miss future episodes, hit the subscribe button and set notifications bell. And now let's get started. 10. Oklahoma City Bombing. The Oklahoma City bombing of 1995 was a devastating act of terrorism that left 168 people dead and hundreds more injured. It occurred at 9:02 a.m. on April 19, 1995, when a radical anti-government militia member, Timothy McVeigh, detonated a truck bomb in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City. The bomb destroyed more than half of the 9-story building and damaged 324 other buildings in the surrounding area. The attack was the deadliest terrorist attack to ever occur on American soil prior to the September 11th attacks. In the days that followed, a massive investigation was launched to track down those responsible for the attack. It was perpetrated by McVeigh and his accomplice, Terry Nichols, who were both members of the radical anti-government militia group, the Michigan Militia. The two men had planned and executed the bombing together in an attempt to strike back against the U.S. government for what they believed to be oppressive and tyrannical policies. The aftermath of the bombing was a massive outpouring of grief and shock from the American people. President Bill Clinton addressed the nation in a speech on April 23, 1995, condemning the attack and vowing to take action against domestic terrorism. 9. Tianjin Explosions. On the night of August 12, 2015, two explosions rocked the Chinese port city of Tianjin, located in the northeastern part of the country. The blasts, which occurred within 30 seconds of each other, were felt as far away as Beijing and were the result of a warehouse storing hazardous chemicals in the Tianjin-Binhainou area exploding. The explosions caused extensive damage to the city and its surrounding area, killing 173 people, injuring more than 700, and leaving thousands of people homeless. The cause of the explosions has since been determined to have been improperly stored and labeled hazardous chemicals, primarily sodium cyanide and ammonium nitrate. The blasts were so powerful that they registered on seismographs as far away as South Korea. The explosions and subsequent fires caused extensive environmental damage, releasing a number of hazardous chemicals into the air and water. The local government has been criticized for their handling of the disaster, with many people believing that the environmental damage could have been minimized if the government had reacted more quickly. In the aftermath of the explosions, the Chinese government has promised compensation to those affected and has taken steps to improve safety regulations in the area. 8. Beirut Port Explosion. On August 4 in year 2020, a massive explosion rocked the Lebanese capital of Beirut, sending a shockwave throughout the city and beyond. The cause of the explosion was a large fire that had started in the port at approximately 6 p.m. local time. This fire had triggered a massive explosion that was felt for miles, causing extensive damage to the city and killing at least 200 people, injuring over 6,500, and leaving an estimated 300,000 people homeless. The cause of the fire and subsequent explosion is still under investigation, but it is believed to have been sparked by a shipment of ammonium nitrate that had been improperly stored at the port since 2013. The explosion caused extensive damage to the port and surrounding area, destroying more than 6,000 homes and damaging over 300,000 others. The aftermath of the explosion has been one of shock and grief, with the Lebanese people calling for accountability and a renewed focus on safety regulations. In the days following the explosion, The government has promised financial aid to those affected, but many believe that this is not enough. The tragedy has also reignited calls for political reform in Lebanon, as many believe that the government's lack of oversight and corruption are to blame for the disaster. Seven. Texas City Disaster. On April 16, 1947, a massive explosion occurred in the port of Texas City, resulting in the death of 581 people and injuring thousands more. The cause of the explosion was a fire that had started on board the French-registered vessel, the SS Grand Camp, which was carrying ammonium nitrate and other hazardous cargo. The fire spread to the surrounding ships and triggered a series of explosions that destroyed the port and much of the city. The explosions also caused a 12-foot tidal wave that swept through the city, causing additional destruction. The death toll from the disaster was one of the highest of any industrial accident in U.S. history. In the aftermath of the disaster, the U.S. government launched an investigation to determine the cause of the explosion. The investigation found that the SS Grand Camp had been improperly stored and that the fire had been caused by a spark from a welding machine. It also found that the port had inadequate safety measures in place, which contributed to the magnitude of the disaster. As a result of the investigation, the U.S. government passed the Texas City Disaster Act, which provided assistance to those affected by the disaster and improved safety regulations in the port. 6. Halifax Explosion. On December 6, 1917, a massive explosion rocked the Canadian city of Halifax, Nova Scotia, killing approximately 2,000 people and injuring thousands more. The explosion was caused by an accident involving two ships, the Belgian relief vessel SS Mo and the French munitions ship SS Mont Blanc, which collided in Halifax Harbour. The Mont Blanc was carrying a cargo of picric acid, TNT, guncotton, and benzol, and when it collided with the MO, the resulting explosion was so powerful that it destroyed much of the city and its surrounding area. In addition to the human casualties, the explosion also destroyed over 1,600 homes, leaving over 9,000 people homeless. In the aftermath of the explosion, the Canadian government launched an investigation to determine the cause of the disaster. The inquiry found that the MO had been traveling at an unsafe speed and that the harbor had inadequate safety regulations. As a result of the inquiry, several safety regulations were put in place, including a ban on ships carrying hazardous cargo traveling in the harbor. The Halifax explosion is one of the deadliest accidents in Canadian history. The tragedy has left a lasting legacy in the city, with a memorial erected in the city center and a memorial park. 5. Chernobyl Nuclear Disaster. On April 26, 1986, a massive explosion occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, resulting in one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. The explosion, which was caused by a sudden power surge, released a massive amount of radioactive material into the environment, contaminating the surrounding area and beyond. The impact of the disaster was felt both immediately and in the years that followed. In the immediate aftermath, approximately 4,000 people were killed and thousands more were injured. In the years that followed, the consequences of the disaster have been felt throughout Europe and the world. The radioactive material spread with the wind, contaminating food and water supplies and causing a variety of health problems. In the aftermath of the disaster, the Soviet Union launched an investigation to determine the cause of the explosion. The investigation found that the power surge had been caused by a combination of human error and a flawed design of the reactor. As a result of the disaster, the Soviet Union was forced to close all of its nuclear power plants and implement new safety regulations. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster is one of the most devastating accidents in history and has had lasting consequences for the people of Ukraine and the world. 4. Bhopal chemical disaster. On the night of December 2, 1984, a massive gas leak occurred at a Union Carbide pesticide plant in the Indian city of Bhopal, resulting in one of the worst industrial disasters in history. The leak occurred when a storage tank containing a highly toxic chemical, methyl isocyanate, ruptured and released a cloud of the chemical into the atmosphere. The chemical cloud spread throughout the city, contaminating the air and water and causing thousands of people to experience symptoms of poisoning. In the days that followed, it was estimated that at least 15,000 people had died from the gas leak and thousands more had suffered from its effects. In the aftermath of the disaster, the Indian government launched an investigation to determine the cause of the accident. The investigation found that the leak had been caused by a combination of human error and inadequate safety regulations. Union Carbide was found to be negligent in its handling of the chemical, and the company was forced to pay compensation to the victims. The Bhopal chemical disaster is one of the most devastating industrial accidents in history and serves as a reminder of the importance of safety regulations in the industrial sector. The disaster has prompted a renewed focus on safety standards and regulations. 3. Krakatoa eruption. On August 26, 1883, one of the deadliest volcanic eruptions in history occurred at the Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia. The eruption, which was so powerful that it could be heard over 3,000 miles away, was caused by a massive explosion that released a cloud of ash and pumice that rose high into the sky. The eruption triggered a series of tsunamis that swept through the region, killing approximately 36,000 people and causing extensive damage to the surrounding area. The eruption also released an immense amount of ash and dust into the atmosphere, resulting in a global temperature decrease and a spectacular red sunset that could be seen around the world. In the aftermath of the disaster, the Indonesian government launched an investigation to determine the cause of the eruption. The investigation found that the eruption had been caused by a combination of seismic activity and climatic conditions in the region. The Krakatoa eruption of 1883 is one of the most destructive volcanic eruptions in history and serves as a reminder of the destructive power of nature. The disaster has had lasting consequences for the people of Indonesia, and it has prompted a renewed focus on the monitoring of volcanic activity in the region. 2. Tambora eruption. On April 10, 1815, the Mount Tambora volcano in Indonesia erupted in one of the most devastating volcanic events in history. The eruption was so powerful that it released an immense amount of ash and dust into the atmosphere, resulting in a global temperature decrease and a spectacular red sunset that could be seen around the world. The eruption triggered a series of tsunamis that swept through the region, killing approximately 92,000 people and causing extensive damage to the surrounding area. The eruption also caused a widespread famine due to the destruction of crops and livestock and the disruption of trade routes. In the aftermath of the disaster, the Indonesian government launched an investigation to determine the cause of the eruption. The investigation found that the eruption had been caused by a combination of seismic activity and climatic conditions in the region. The Mount Tambora eruption of 1815 is one of the most destructive volcanic eruptions in history and serves as a reminder of the destructive power of nature. The disaster has had lasting consequences for the people of Indonesia, and it has prompted a renewed focus on the monitoring of volcanic activity in the region. 1. Hiroshima atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the world was changed forever when the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The blast, which was caused by the detonation of a uranium-235 enriched nuclear bomb, destroyed much of the city and killed approximately 140,000 people. The impact of the atomic bomb was felt not only in Hiroshima, but throughout the world. The blast also caused extensive environmental damage, releasing a number of hazardous chemicals into the air and water. In the years that followed, the survivors of the attack experienced a wide range of health problems, including leukemia and other forms of cancer. In the aftermath of the attack, the United States launched an investigation to determine the cause of the bombing. The investigation found that the bombing had been part of an effort by the US to bring an end to World War II and to demonstrate the power of the atomic bomb. The Hiroshima atomic bomb is one of the most devastating attacks in history and serves as a reminder of the destructive power of nuclear weapons. The disaster has had lasting consequences for the people of Japan, and it has sparked a renewed focus on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation.